A lot of the most famous and influential composers have one or a couple pieces that pretty much everyone thinks of when they hear their name. Wendy Carlos, Switched on Bach. J. Dilla, Donuts. Beethoven, dun 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 dun, dun 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 dun. But Pauline Oliveros was different. She's not like other girls. Her thing, the thing that pretty much everyone remembers her for, was probably just listening. If you're watching at home going, well, I'm sitting here listening to you drivel on right now, and it doesn't feel that special, I would say fair enough. But not all forms of listening are the same. The truth is, there's an incredibly detailed, varied, and unique world of sounds going on around us all the time. And tuning into this world can offer some pretty deep and meaningful experiences. Oliveros obviously recognized this, but she took it even a step further, to a lifelong practice and philosophy that she called deep listening.
Deep listening is listening in every possible way to everything possible. This means one hears all sounds, no matter what one is doing. Such intense listening includes hearing the sounds of daily life, of nature, and of one's own thoughts, as well as musical sounds. Deep listening is my life practice.
Rather than wanting to flex her composition skills or make an influential piece of music, Oliveros' goal was just to get as many people as possible to listen. Her approach prioritized inclusivity and the subjective experience of individuals rather than her own singular genius as a composer. In addition to deep listening, Oliveros has done a ton of different stuff. And honestly, it's been really hard to pick and choose what to include in this video. She was one of the first tape composers, one of the first electronic music composers. She designed and realized her own electronic instrument. She was one of the original members of the San Francisco Tape Music Center. She taught at 5 different universities, published or co-authored 11 different books, and a ton of academic articles. She had her own foundation, and she did a lot of feminist activism, and actually had pretty decent politics. Pauline Oliveros was born in 1932 in Houston, Texas. Her mom gave her an accordion when she was 9 that she would end up using for her entire career. She also realized that she was a lesbian at a very young age and gave herself the nickname Buster. She GTFO'd Houston pretty quickly and moved to San Francisco when she was 20. She frequented a gay bar there called the Black Cat, where there was a marvelous pianist. She got her first tape recorder when she was 21 and started by just recording the sounds that were going on outside of her window. When she played back the tape, she realized that she was missing a lot of the sounds that were happening regularly out there. And this realization was all too existential. So she vowed to try to start to hear every sound that she possibly could. Towards the end of the 50s, she started improvising and making her own compositions with her tape machine. And in 1959, she completed her first piece called Time Perspectives. She said that her work with tape brought her to a new level of listening and formulating sounds. Now, this isn't the first time that I've pointed out that a woman composer has done something before male composers who ended up getting all the credit. And I know that it doesn't always boil down to sexism. Sometimes the first iteration of a new idea or concept just isn't as well developed as later versions, and those are the ones that get remembered. But I do think that it's pretty disappointing that, at least in my experience, Oliveros is never mentioned along with Steve Reich and Terry Riley, who are considered the daddies of experimental tape music. And the first pieces they wrote came out 4 and 6 years after hers did. Although Time Perspectives was one of her first pieces, it's already very Oliveros-y. It's made of super slow-moving, layered improvisations, and there are these beautiful long stretches of silence. It's the kind of piece that just makes you want to take a deep breath and enjoy the feeling of time passing. In 1961, Oliveros and her friend Ramon Sender started a concert series at a new performance space called the Sonics. This is Oliveros recounting the rush to get the whole thing off the ground in a letter to her mom.
Ramon started building an electronic laboratory just 8 weeks ago and scheduled the opening for December 18th with tape pieces by him, me, Terry Riley, and Phil Windsor. About 10 days before the 18th, there was enough equipment assembled to start work on the pieces. Ramon confiscated a practice keyboard and wired it so there was a switch for each speaker, which enabled us to throw the sound all around the auditorium and even out in the hall. We closed the concert with a live improvisation, which was very successful.
This electronic music laboratory became the San Francisco Tape Music Center a year later. It was a non-profit electronic studio and performance space, co-ran by Oliveros, Sender, Morton Subotnick, and a few others. It's now considered a legendary space in the development of electronic music, and some of the most influential composers of the 20th century composed and performed works there, like Steve Reich, James Tenney, and Luc Ferrari. Oliveros herself composed her first piece of electronic music at the center, called Bye Bye Butterfly. She was determined to learn the technology that was available at the center and worked through the night so that she could work by herself. It was also during this time that she developed her expanded instrument system. It processes sounds from an improviser using a series of delays whose parameters can be controlled in real time, also by the improviser. Throughout the rest of the 60s, she composed a ton of electronic music. From what I can tell, she composed 39 different pieces in 5 years. But to be honest, this isn't my favorite era of her work. The pieces are 20 or 30 minutes long, and they're quite harsh. But she clearly had well-defined aesthetic goals, and I think she realized them effectively. So I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't bother listening to them, or that I think they're bad, just that these pieces don't rev my particular personal engine. In 1970, she wrote an article for the New York Times called "And Don't Call Them Lady Composers." And obviously I know that a lot has changed for women since the 70s, but there are some points in there that are very much still relevant. She writes,
Rightly, this expression is anathema to many self-respecting women composers. It effectively separates women's efforts from the mainstream.
I totally agree. I know that I have a series on this channel called Women in Electronic Music, so this is probably a good opportunity for me to explain myself and why I agree with her. Obviously, there are a ton of brilliant women composers who have, in a lot of cases, made pretty massive impacts on the world of electronic music. And obviously the fact that they are women is why they've been left out of these historical narratives. It's like the point about experimental tape music that I made earlier. Instead of Reich and Riley, it should be Reich, Riley, and Oliveros. But I do think that it's easy to get too focused on identity, especially because nowadays it's like the go-to method for corporations and people to act like they care without having to actually do anything about it. Like, it's a lot easier to say, "I love women composers," than it is to actually make space for us in music communities. And although women composers are getting a lot more attention now, which is a good thing, I think what happens is that women composer becomes its own category of musician. And as Oliveros says, putting all the emphasis on our identities rather than taking our contributions and ideas and our music seriously does a lot more to sequester us than it does to actually include us in music communities and historical narratives. And Oliveros herself has been pigeonholed like this over and over again by major music publications. Howard Brick wrote,
Pauline Oliveros is one of the few well-known women working in new music.
Kyle Gann wrote,
If Cage could be said to have a female counterpart, it would have to be Pauline Oliveros.
In two of the most popular books on the history of 20th century music, Alex Ross's The Rest is Noise and Paul Griffith's Modern Music Before and After, she was just one on a list of women composers, while the ideas and music of her male contemporaries were discussed in detail. So for my part, I think that we do need to make an extra effort to talk about the contributions of these women composers who have been discounted and ignored on account of their identities. And I do think it's important to point out the ways that they've had to be extra graceful, persistent, and determined to make the contributions that they have. But I think what we have to avoid doing is acting like it's the identities of these people that makes them notable, because there would really be no reason to talk about Pauline Oliveros or any of these other women if they weren't brilliant composers in their own right. Anyway, Oliveros herself goes further than just rightfully demanding recognition for herself and other women composers. At the end of the article, she writes about her philosophy for including everyone in the experience of listening.
Critics do a great deal of damage by wishing to discover greatness. It does not matter that all composers are great composers. It matters that this activity be encouraged among all the population, that we communicate with each other in non-destructive ways.
In 1970, when the article was written, she had already begun to take a long break from composing and performing. She said that she found the political turmoil of the late 60s to be so overwhelming that she turned inward. She would play drones on her accordion and sing along with them to help herself relax. Although she was not actively developing her practice, this time spent just listening was a major first step in the development of deep listening. In 1971, she took another step. She wrote a piece specifically for non-musicians called Sonic Meditations. It's a Yoko Ono-esque instructions piece where each meditation is a prompt to do something that engages focused listening. Number 5 is take a walk at night. Walk so silently that your feet become ears. Then in 1972, she started the Meditations Project, where a group of 20 people would get together 5 days a week to do pieces from the Sonic Meditations. But it wasn't until 1988 that she came up with the term deep listening. She was doing a concert at the Fort Worden CISTERN, which is an underground water tank that had a 45-second reverb time.
I came up with the name Deep Listening, and then we laughed a lot and rolled on the floor because we'd been 14 feet underground.
But what exactly is deep listening? Is it just really focused listening to everyday sounds? Or is it more like that party in Eyes Wide Shut? I would say that it's like a life philosophy and meditation practice that says that focused listening should be the central part of your everyday experience. It includes everyday sounds, but also your own thoughts, or even the physical sensation of listening. It's pretty crazy how often you can actually feel sounds in your body. Like when I was researching this video, I was sitting with my legs up on a coffee table and a big truck drove by, and I was surprised at just how much the sound vibrated my legs on the coffee table. It reminded me that listening isn't always just a cerebral or emotional experience, and that the physical sensation of sounds can be really powerful. You know, I haven't been clubbing in a while, but you know when you're just like, you're grooving and you're just feeling the bass and you're just like, I really respect how Oliveros' political beliefs are so clearly reflected in her work. Like, you don't need to be a trained musician or theorist to follow a guided meditation on focused listening. And teaching deep listening became the focus of her entire career from the mid-80s until she passed away. And I think this inclusiveness really separates Oliveros from other composers who were dealing with similar themes around the same time. Like John Cage wrote this silent piece called 433 that's all about compelling the listener to appreciate everyday sounds. But still, so many people don't get 433 at all. And it's become this classic talking point for people who are like, look at how ridiculous music has become. People don't listen to real music anymore. Like Journey or Bon Jovi, the real good music. I'm not trying to say that because 433 is easily misunderstood that it's bad, or that accessibility should be the only thing that we judge a piece of music on. But I do think it's really interesting to compare the differences in approach. Like John Cage was like, I'm gonna do my thing, and if you don't get it, go shit. Which, like, fair enough. But Oliveros, on the other hand, used deep listening to expand the kinds of social relationships that we can form around listening and music. Instead of centering her practice around lofty concepts or advanced musical techniques, she just spent her energy trying to get as many people as possible to listen. In addition to teaching deep listening, Oliveros started a deep listening band that did improvised performances and recordings. And in 2005, she started the Deep Listening Institute that continues to give workshops, publications, deep listening retreats, and trains new teachers to continue spreading the good deep listening gospel. In the later years of her life, she was asked by an interview what she thought was her greatest accomplishment.
Well, I'm not terrifically interested in leaving so-called masterpieces, but I think that more important is the work that I've done to facilitate creativity in others as well as in myself. What I think about legacy is leaving behind ways of listening and ways of responding.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this episode of Sounds Good. I had a lot of fun making it, so I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I had fun making it. I have a Sounds Good adjacent announcement to make, which is that I am teaching private lessons in electronic music. There are 6 different courses that have a different sort of specialty, and you can find all the info at sarah-feldman.com/learnmusic. And if you're wondering whether there are still spots available, which there are a few, you will not be able to book a lesson if there are no more spots available. So if you go to the booking thing and you can book a lesson, then there are spots available. Feel free to get in touch. You can find my email on my site and other places if you have any questions. Yeah. Bye.